Today, I'm thrilled that we have with us Jamaal Baptiste and his quartet. And he and his wife, Anna, have been married just for, legally hitched for about 6 months, I think, right? Jamaal is just finishing his first year of teaching at Cal Poly. He's in charge of the jazz program there. He's a composer, arranger, ethnomusicologist, a native of Aruba, and has come to the U.S. about 15 years ago. He's doing just such a marvelous job at Cal Poly with all the groups there. He got his PhD at Indiana University. I think several people in the audience were at last week's piano showcase. I think he might have been the audience favorite there. Anna Nelson on saxophone also teaches at Cal Poly. She's received numerous awards around the country for her playing. And also in the quartet are our favorite bass and drummer, Dylan Johnson and Darrell Voss. So please give a nice welcome to the Jamaal Baptiste Quartet.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so very much for being here. My name is Jamaal Baptiste, and for today we are the Jamaal Baptiste Jazz Quartet. We are so happy to be here. I would like to take just a brief moment to introduce the members of the quartet that you're listening to. On drums, we have Darrell Voss. On bass, we have Dylan Johnson. Dylan Johnson. And of course, on saxophone, we have the amazing, the wonderful, the best thing to ever happen to me in the world, my lovely wife, Anna Nelson. So today, we just want to take you all on a musical journey, and I've been told that there's a theme, and the theme for me today is fellowship, because I feel like our very first event that we attended was here. We arrived, I think, on the 15th, and then I believe Dave Becker performed, and so we felt so welcomed here. Not only at the church, but in the community. So I decided on fellowship just to show our appreciation. So the songs that you will be hearing will touch on that. The first tune that we performed is called The Plumbers Union. This was one of the very first tune I composed when I moved to the United States, many years ago now. And so as you listen, you'll hear themes of love, joy, support, union. And so this is my way of saying thank you for embracing us and welcoming us into this wonderful community here in San Luis Obispo. So that said, I'm not going to talk too much because I enjoy talking, but you all came to hear some good music. So our next tune is There's No Greater Love, because we felt the love since we've arrived, so we're going to share some of that with you. So this is There's No Greater Love. Thank you.
That was a waltz from, a waltz that I composed called Waltz Number 4. It's based on the Aruban traditional waltz. And I thought it would be a good piece to present to you all, because you all accepted me into your community, and now I'm sharing my culture and my folklore with you all. So that was Waltz number 4. I have 11 more to write. So we won't, yeah, exactly. We won't be playing all of them today, but you will hear more of the Aruban waltzes. How are you all doing? Are you all enjoying yourself? So this next tune that we will perform it was composed by the very world-renowned trumpet player, Clifford Brown, and it's called Joy Spring. So we began with union, we shifted to love, then we shifted to the exchange of culture and folklore. Now we're going to experience some joy. So as with all of my performances, if you want to clap, feel free to clap. If you want to tap your feet, it's also okay. Pastor, is it okay if some people stand and dance a little bit? Okay. There's order and everything, so I would like to ask permission before. All right, so it's been approved. So if you just want a two-step, that's okay, right? We're here to have fun and fellowship with each other. So this is Joy Spring. I hope you enjoy. Thank you very much. Once again, we have Darrell Voss on drums. I'm going to say correctly this time, Dylan Johnson on bass. The amazing Anna Nelson on saxophone. My name is Jamaal Baptiste. Thank you very much. We will take this short, we'll break and we'll pass it over to the Reverend of the house. Thank you.
One more time for the... It's so fun to do these. I have no jazz talent at all. And so it's just like coming into another world and listening. So thanks for being here. I don't know what you did to be sequestered over here, but nobody's nice to the drummer. I get asked to do this, and one of the things I do when I get stuck for an idea is I go to this day in history. Now, the people who know me at church know this to be true because I talk a lot about history. I did go to the Today in History for June 8th to find out a few things that happened on this date. Michelangelo's David, that beautiful statue, went on display on this date in 1504. See? Jeopardy is on at 7. You'll all be set. George Orwell's book, 1984, was published on this date. Oddly enough, in 1949. And actually, 1984 on this date, the movie Ghostbusters. So I have a couple of quotes here. Who are you going to call, right? Thank you. So we got a little callback. First we had dancing in here, and now we got a little callback. That's pretty good. Never happens to me on a Sunday morning. And just today, in this room, the congregation that worships here, we celebrated Pentecost, which is a Christian holiday that remembers the gift of the Holy Spirit, which is the energizing force that drives the church. Happened in the first century. Sometimes churches will sing happy birthday to the church. This is the church's birthday, Pentecost Sunday. I bring that up because I think Pentecost is the most jazz-like holiday in the entire church calendar. On Pentecost, people who were forced to speak a language that wasn't their own, they were forced to speak Greek all over the Western world. They started to hear the message of God in their own languages in Jerusalem. That's one of the many small miracles that happened on Pentecost Sunday. They were stunned, and they were happy to hear that message in their own language. Pentecost is a reminder, I think, that diversity isn't a stumbling block to grace and community and progress and cooperation. So it fits with the themes we're talking about today. Pentecost, I think, shows us that different people can live and work and thrive together, even with their differences, and maybe because of their differences. Wouldn't that be a message that you'd like to see on CNN when you get up in the morning instead of what we're seeing? I can be more political now. This is a jazz lecture. Pentecost reminds us of the way that jazz takes different voices and instruments and rhythms and joins them together into something meaningful and beautiful and life-giving. And wouldn't that be something good to carry on after this concert? That's what you came to experience today, and so I'm going to stop talking now. But I want to say enjoy the rest of the concert, happy Pentecost, and thank you for being here. You guys go back here.
Yes, we were connected even before we met. So I anticipated that the message would be centered around fellowship, community, communion. And so in that spirit, a few individuals asked me to, repeat one of the songs that I performed last week. So in that same spirit, we will perform the song, or our arrangement of the song, Is You. I hope you enjoy this. So that was the song Is You. And now our next tune will be Just in Time. And I chose this song for many reasons. But I really like the title because it can be for anything. You can be just in time for your friend, you can be just in time for your family, you can be just in time for an individual in the community. And I think, especially on a day like today, when we're celebrating Pentecost, it's so important to keep your neighbor in mind. Truly, sometimes you never know what people are going through, and it's always good to just give them a call or give them, a little tap. Hey, I see you. Maybe that will be a moment that someone needs. Just a little friendly tap on the shoulder to let them know that you are there for them. So this is why I chose Just in Time, because we're here for you, and you are here for us. Thank you. in Time, featuring featuring our trio, Dylan Johnson. Thank goodness, yeah. Dylan Johnson, yes. Darrell Voss. You know, it's interesting, and I feel, so I work with Dylan, so I'm used to saying his name every so often. But for some reason today, I want to say Dylan Voss. I don't know why. I don't know why. So I'm trying to be correct today. So now we will play, so we have 2 tunes left, and these will be 2 original compositions of mine. This, it doesn't have a name yet, but it's called TBA. I feel like after this performance, I will have a name, so I will be inspired. And it will feature myself and Anna Nelson on tenor sax. So I hope you all are enjoying yourselves, because we are. Yeah, thank you. So this is TBA. I hope you enjoy this piece. fellowship. Thank you. So now we'll play our final tune of the evening, and this is the second. Well, actually, no. I'm sorry. I believe earlier I said that Plumbers Union was the first tune that I wrote. That was the second tune that I composed. This tune is originally the first tune that I composed, and it's called Smiling Faces. And this is a calypso. So, that's right, I'm seeing some shimmying in the seats. So, it is expected, it's not gonna get too crazy, but we're definitely we will be taking it down to Aruba, and then down to Trinidad and Tobago, and then we'll bring it back full circle to San Luis Obispo. Once again, Darrell Voss and drums, Dylan Johnson on bass, Anna Nelson on saxophone. My name is Jamaal Baptiste. Thank you very much for coming out and listening to live music. And thank you very much for having us. This is Smiling Faces. I hope you enjoy.
Thank you. Once again, Darrell Voss on drums, Dylan Johnson on bass, Anna Nelson on sax. My name is Jamaal Baptiste. Thank you very much for coming out. We look forward to speaking with you all outside.